Okay, let me see if I can try to fix that, inshallah ta'ala. Is it a little bit better now? Okay. Yeah, but I have the echoes down. How about now? Is it better? Or is it, do you still have do people hear echo? Okay, maybe it's just me. But this is better though. Okay, so inshallah ta'ala, if it starts not sounding right, just let me know in the chat, inshallah. Or you can just unmute yourself and say that, hey, it's not sounding right again. Or if it sounds too low. Okay. So, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. Jazakallah khair for everyone for joining us for another session of Living Islam. I pray that you are all well. And so, inshallah ta'ala, for those who may be new to the Living Islam, this is our monthly gathering where we come and we talk to one another about different things that may be going on in our lives and have discussions in relation to essentially whatever might be on our minds. And so we like to say that this is not a dars, this is not a lecture, this is not a halaqah or anything like that. There's no preset topic or anything. So this is a conversation-based experience. So if we don't have any conversation, then we can sit in each other's comfortable or uncomfortable silence for the next 2 hours. But inshallah, it's really an open floor. I like to always kind of say that this is not a Q&A, even though it oftentimes kind of ends up being something like that. But this is meant to be an open discussion, so please feel free to, if you're comfortable, you can unmute yourselves and just engage in conversation, inshallah. So with that, probably even more brief introduction, then I'll just open up the floor to whoever's going to be the first brave soul, inshallah. Not everyone at once. And so while we wait for the first brave soul, just give me 1 second. Talk to one another about different things that may be going on in our lives and okay, I don't know how I just heard myself. But okay. Talk to one another about different things that may be going on in our lives and that's interesting. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So how's everyone enjoying? Oh, okay. So YouTube is on a bit of a delay then. Okay. No, it makes sense. I was wondering, I was like, wait, how am I hearing myself? No one yet? Inshallah, everyone will be preparing for Yom Ashura, inshallah, on Wednesday. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Yom Ashura will be on Thursday. The 9th of Muharram will be Wednesday. And then, of course, the 11th will be Friday. Uh, and so it'd be recommended to fast either Wednesday and Thursday or Thursday and Friday, uh, or uh, all 3 days if a person wanted to do that. So people are saying that the volume is still low. Okay. So I put these headphones on so I could try to see how it sounds on my end as well. Is that a little bit better? Is it louder that way? So Sister Mina says it's louder for her. I just hear an echoing type of sound and I'm trying to see how I can get rid of it. If I do this, does that make it sound better for people? All right, because I'm basically what's happening is I have my 1 year old, and so my you know unofficial studio is basically a portion of the living room that we've kind of just blocked off and we made into like our library slash studio, so to speak. And with that, uh, my son, my 1 year old, comes in sometimes and he messes with the mixer. So notice that if I don't notice that he's messed with it, then I'll have a situation where the uh, the fine tuning of the mixer will get messed up, uh, and so I have to try to fine tune it again. And I'm not an I'm not an audio video person, so I just kind of have to kind of like keep playing with the different things, and see what sounds better, what sounds worse. But does this sound good to everyone? Like there's no echo or like my voice doesn't sound distorted in any way or anything like that? And is it loud enough for everyone now? Okay, tamam. So inshallah, hopefully, make dua my 1 year old won't come back in and do his own thing again. But in the meantime, I did see that there was someone who put something in uh, on YouTube. How do you navigate parents who seem like they want to make decisions for you, even as a grown adult? So, subhanallah, one of my teachers, he has a saying that I like to say all the time. He said, everything is relative except for the relatives, they're absolute. And so you could say that the parents are probably are at the epitome of that. And um, in terms of trying to navigate the relationship with the parents, um, one work that I think everyone at least once in your life, you should go through it, ideally with a teacher. But even if you don't have a teacher, at least to read through it and read the commentary in terms of the translation of it, is a book called, um, the title of it in English as a translation is The Rights of Parents. So Sheikh Rami Ansor, he translated it and he just gave it the name, The Rights of Parents. However, the actual book name is subhanallah. Uh, it's because Sheikh Muhammad Maulud was the original author of it. Um, uh, yes. Zafar bin Murad fi bir bin Abu wa Ajdad. Jazakallah khair. So obviously that does not translate into the rights of parents, but it's just it's kind of easier just to say the rights of parents. But if a person goes through that text, Sheikh Muhammad Maulud, he elucidates, essentially the way that we're, ideally supposed to try to be with our parents. And this is in the case of whether they are the greatest parents in the world or the worst parents that have ever existed. And so usually when it comes to parents, what I usually, try to remind myself and others is that our relationship with our parents is an act of worship. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions directly in the Quran about the importance of bir walidain, of the importance of having righteousness towards one's parents. So even if you have a parent who is not necessarily making it easy for you, one of the things to always remember is that my being good to them, even if it becomes a difficulty for me, is a means of me drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In many different situations, even going back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are able to see the benefit of goodness to the parents, and we have different statements of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the benefit of being good to the parents. So, for example, there's a famous tabi'i by the name of Awais Amr bin Qarni, Awais bin Amr al-Qarni. Sometimes he's just referred to as Awais al-Qarni, but his full, his fuller name is Awais bin Amr al-Qarni. So he was from the tribe of Qarn, which was in the Yemen. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned to Ali and Umar that if they were to ever meet him, meaning that if they were ever to come across this individual, Awais al-Qarni, that they should ask that he makes dua for them. Now, the significance about this is because I already said that he was an individual who was a tabi. So for those who may not be familiar with the terminology, a tabi'i is someone who was not a companion, so they never met the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, but they met the Sahaba. And so what we understand from a basic foundational aspect of Aqidah is that a Sahaba is always going to have a greater rank than a Tabi. Because as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he mentioned that the best generation is my generation. Then those that follow them, then those that follow them. So it's unanimous, there's ijma', there's a unanimous agreement that the best generation is the generation of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. And so the facts that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and even before I get to that, that and within the Sahaba themselves, you have those who are considered to be better than others. So, for example, the the Muhajirun have a status of being of the elect of the Sahaba. And then from within that, the Badr have a status of greatness amongst the Sahaba. And then after that, you have the Ashar Mubashirin who have a great status amongst the Sahaba. And then you have those who are of the first to enter into Islam from the Sahaba, having a great status. And so for the most part, Ali and Amr, they basically fit all of these categories. You know, the even though, for example, Amr was a little bit later in accepting Islam, but he was still amongst the early people who accepted Islam prior to the hijrah to Medina. So for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to tell these two individuals, not to mention that these are individuals who, for example, about Umar, the Prophet ﷺ said that if there's going to be a Nabi Ba'ati, there's going to be a prophet after me, it will be Umar. And with Ali, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he considered Ali to be from his Ahl Bayt. That Ali is considered to be from the immediate family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he is the one who the Prophet ﷺ specifically chose to marry his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha, who he said about her that she is a piece of me. And so I'm just, I'm setting the stage, so to speak, so that we can see the fadl, the merit of these individuals. And he's telling them that if they meet Uwais al-Qarni, they need to ask him to make dua for them. So that gives you an idea of how significant Uwais al-Qarni is. And part of the reason why Uwais al-Qarni had this significance is that during the time that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was still alive, Uwais al-Qarni, he wanted to come to Medina and be with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and to fight in jihad. However, he had a mother who was ill, and so instead of going out to meet the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and to fight fi sabilillah, he decided to stay with his mother and take care of his mother. And so, again, this just shows you the high rank that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places with goodness to one's parents. So I say all that to say, going back to the original question, is that if we're in a position, even if it's an inconvenience, or it's going to be a situation where we're not able to do exactly what we would prefer to do in our lives by means of pleasing our parents, it can be a means of great reward and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why, again, I recommend reading Sheikh Muhammad Maulud's work that was translated by Sheikh Rami Ansor, so that we can kind of get a better idea of what it means when we talk about having goodness towards the parents. Because unfortunately, in our Western cultures today, this concept of having goodness to the parent is, you can almost say completely lost, because we have this sense of ultra independence and just complete separation from our parents. I mean, put it like this, the great Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the founders of the four schools of Islamic law from a Sunni perspective, they mentioned about him that he would not go on an excursion, meaning he would not go for a traveling journey until he went and sought permission from his mother, even as an adult. That here's this great scholar, the of the greatest of the imams to ever walk the face of the earth, individual who the likeness of the world has not seen since him. He would not go on a journey without going to his mother and asking her permission to go. And so it's a situation where, again, to the best of our ability if we're able to please our parents and it's not going to be something that is going to cause a detriment or a harm to us, then, there's much goodness in doing so. However, having said all that, so like I'm setting the stage, uh, um, kind of directly coming, directly coming to the question. Having said all of that, there is a limit to what a parent can ask of their child. So if it becomes a situation where a parent is becoming overbearing, a parent is becoming abusive, whether that be emotionally, physically, mentally, or even spiritually. For example, you hear about situations where parents like threaten their children of like, I'll make dua against you if you don't do this or that, and so on and so forth. Those are situations where really it's just going to depend on the situation, but it's a situation where you don't have to put yourself in harm's way. So in many instances, when it comes to the parents, because the relationship is so serious and sensitive at the same time, one of the ideal situations is to try to discuss your specific situation with an upright Muslim scholar who understands the sanctity of the rights of the parents, to try to help and assist you in your specific circumstance. Because, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily the case, this is why I'm trying to like mention both aspects. But in some situations, because we don't have an Islamic kind of understanding in terms of how to go about interacting with our parents, sometimes what happens is that what we perceive as being like overbearing um, or too much or too invasive in our lives and so on and so forth, sometimes it's not as bad as we're making it out to be. But at the same time, we have to recognize that yes, there are situations where there are parents who do transgress the bounds. But in those type of situations, you really want to be very delicate in it, because the goodness to parents is such a strong command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that one of the most major of sins, and in some, you could look in some of the different narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, where he's asked about the major sins. In different narrations, he will sometimes reference aquqa walidain, having ill treatment to one's parents, even to the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that we are not even to say uff to our parents. And what the ulama mention about that is that they say that uff is kind of like the lightest show of displeasure with our parents. And so it's a very delicate balance. And so there's no cookie cutter answer that can be given, because it's going to go based upon people's individual situations and to what extent a parent is trying to control the lives of their children. Again, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It does happen sometimes where a parent can become overbearing or over controlling. However, we will want to look at the specific situation to see, okay, what is the best route? Because it could be that a parent is being overbearing. However, if the child is able to just be patient with this parent, that they can receive many, many rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for engaging in this act of worship. And when we say act of worship, we're talking about obeying the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why I try to remind myself and remind others, is that just like there are other aspects of the sacred law that we don't necessarily find easy, however, we still do it anyway. So for example, for many of us, getting up for Fajr is not an easy thing. If we had it our way, we would sleep until, 10 a.m. or until way past sunrise, whatever the case may be, if we were able to. But we make that sacrifice and we get up for Fajr. Why? Because we're trying to please our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we're trying to avoid a punishment, or we are looking for the reward of being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever our intention behind it is, we force ourselves to do it. Or for example, fasting. Fasting is not necessarily easy for many people. However, we still go through the month of Ramadan and we fast the full 29 or 30 days. Why? Because again, possibly of one of those same reasons that we mentioned before. So in the same way, is that look at your interactions with your parents from the standpoint of this is an act of ibadah. That I may not necessarily want to or may not necessarily like it. However, if I'm able to do this in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is, much reward that I can receive from our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, this is not go to the point of you being harmed by anyone. So, you know, so again, this is why we say that in individual situations, it's best to look at the specific situation to try to make sure that uh, we are not harming our relationships with our parents, because again, it's a very major issue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes the rights of others and especially the rights of parents very seriously. And so it's not an easy situation. I'll be the first to admit that I have a lot of work to do when it comes to good treatment of my parents. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me and make it a situation where I am much better with my parents. But it's something where, again, looking at it from the standpoint of ibadah, even for example, in Sheikh Muhammad Maulud's work, in the beginning of it, he mentions Hamdan liman qarama bil imani al-ihsana bil aba'i fil Qur'ani. So like that's how he begins the work. He says, Hamdan liman qarana bil imani al-ihsana bil aba'i fil Qur'ani. He says, praise be to the one who has connected iman with excellence or beauty towards the parents in the Quran. It sounds much better in Arabic, but he's referencing the verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions about the aspect of Tawheed, and then after that saying wa bil walidayna ihsana, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right after speaking about our iman, meaning, believing in and affirming and establishing the oneness of Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions right after that, and to do what after that? And to be have good excellence or beautiful excellence towards your parents. So it's not an easy situation in many instances, but it's a situation where we really want to take it seriously and really strive to do that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and seek assistance. That's why I said the best thing is to try to see if you can have a local scholar or a local imam to be able to talk about the situation, to see if it truly is a situation where the parents are overstepping the bounds, or if it's a situation where it will be better if the individual could be a little bit more patient with their parents in seeking the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything that you do for the sake of Allah, you'll never miss out on anything. So just look at Uwais al-Qarni. How many of us would give anything to be able to meet the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How many of us would just love to have a dream with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in it? Or like being like some of the the ultra righteous and see the Messenger of Allah in awakened state, which has happened with some of the awliya. But this was a situation where Awais was actually physically able to go and see the Messenger of Allah sallallahu. Like all he had to do was travel to Medina, and he would have been able to be in the presence of the best of creation. But he sacrificed that for the sake of his mother. And because of that sacrifice, the Prophet Muhammad praised him and told the kibar, the greatest of the Sahaba, seek his dua. So one of the things that we can look at is that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and greatness, because at the end of the day, because I think the question was specifically asking in relation to making decisions for you. where oftentimes it's going to be some aspect of dunya, like we want you to go to this college or we want you to go get this job and so on and so forth, um, is that if you make those sacrifices in this dunya, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise you in the akhirah. And so, that can be a means of benefit for a person if they're willing to make those sacrifices. Um, but again, it should not go to a point of oppression in any type of way. There are, even with parents, there are limits, but even if a parent is going beyond the bounds, we still have the injunction of treating them with good character. So even if a parent is, truly going beyond the bounds, we still, as their children, have the responsibility to treat them well. That even, and Sheikh Muhammad Maulud mentions, this concept in his poem, is that um, even if you have to disobey your parents, is that you disobey your parents without being without being harsh or cruel or anything like that towards them. That, even if you have to, because if they call you to do something, for example, that's haram, or if, for example, like, some of the I mentioned, like, even if they ask you to do something that's just impossible, like, they ask you to, I want you to clean the garage, clean the basement, and clean the entire house in the next hour. Where it's just like, there's no possible way that that can happen. So you're not going to be able to obey them in that. Is that, even if you're not going to be able to obey them in that, for example, you still treat them with kindness and soft spoken. Like, the way that Sheikh Muhammad Maulud mentions it is that, he mentions about speaking to them a qawlan layyina. And he references this because in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to Musa alayhi salam, he tells Musa alayhi salam to go to Fir'aun and speak to him a qawlan layyina, to speak to him a gentle word. And so, Sheikh Muhammad Maulud is more or less pointing out, it's like, if Allah has commanded Musa to go to Fir'aun, who is an enemy of Musa alayhi salam, and ultimately the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that he is the people of the hellfire. If he's telling Musa alayhi salam to go to a person who is destined for the hellfire and speak to him a light word, a kind word, then what about your parents? Like, if we're commanded, if Musa is commanded to speak to Fir'aun in a light manner, then what about our parents? And so, yeah. So again, I would highly recommend everyone to, maybe next semester at the Mecca Center, maybe that's one of the things we'll look at. We'll go through the rights of parents by Sheikh Muhammad Maulud or something like that. Yeah. We'll see, inshallah. Mashallah. I personally need to go through it again. And so, maybe that's something we can consider doing next semester, inshallah, going through the rights of parents by Sheikh Muhammad Maulud, inshallah. But yeah, it's yes, I know it can be difficult, but but the reward for it, as long as it's not a situation where you're being harmed, is very great. And then sometimes, parents, they could just, you know, just give them a little nudge, and, meaning a little kind nudge. And, oftentimes they'll open up. At the end of the day, for the most part, people who have a healthy relationship with their parents, your parents ultimately just want the best for you. And generally speaking, what happens is that they have much more experience than you do. And they're just, in their own way, trying to guide you in a way so that you can avoid some of the pitfalls that they had to go through when they were coming up. And they're not going to be perfect. And, it's not necessarily, again, always going to be easy. But again, if we're able to, you know, treat them with excellent character and actually please them by, obeying them, then there's great reward in it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't really use the word obey all that much when I was talking about this. And the reason why that is because sometimes sometimes like bir walidain is kind of like translated as obedience to parents, but that's not accurate because again, as we mentioned, is that there are situations in which a person may have to disobey their parents. But again, bir walidain is more about the good treatment of parents, so that whether I obey them or whether I have to disobey them, that I do it in a manner that is excellent and beautiful. That I never try to be in a situation where I am treating my parent in a harsh manner or a displeasing manner. And again, and then the other aspect of it is that when you have your own children, to take the advice that Sheikh Muhammad Maulud mentions towards the end of his poem, where he mentions that as parents, we should make it easy for our children to treat us well. So meaning like you don't make it difficult for your children. So the person who was asking the question, one of the things to take from this as well, like we have to deal with our own parents, as an act of ibadah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, if we are ourselves our parents, then it's upon us to try to make it as easy as possible for our children to be willing to treat us with goodness as well. So it's a two-way street. So we try to be good to our parents, and at the same time, we try to be good to our children so that they can naturally just want to be good to us, so that it's not a difficulty for them to be good to us. Uh, and so, we can try to guide them to what we feel is going to be best for them. Um, but try not to make it a difficulty such that they like will incline towards rebelling against you or anything like that. And so it's not a cookie cutter or like an easy thing to necessarily kind of get right all the time. And the thing is that the person that mentioned it on YouTube, I don't know if they have children or not, but as you get older and you have children, you start to, at least I know this happened for me, and then other people can weigh in if that was their experience. But as you get older and you have your own children, you actually start to understand your own parents more. Like I know, I have, three boys. Two of them are still with us, alhamdulillah. And even on a regular basis, like they'll do something, or I'll have a particular reaction, or I have a particular way that I'm feeling in dealing with them, and I'm just like, subhanallah, I I get it now. Like I know when my father was like that. I know when my mother was like that. I know why they said that. I know why they did that. So, sometimes it takes even just having your own children to kind of start to realize what it is your parents are actually trying to do. It's like, all right, they weren't as crazy as I thought they were. Or like, they weren't as bad as I thought they were. And at the end of the day, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you. That, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He opens the doors of ease so that He guides you to what is most pleasing to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for where we may have fallen short ourselves and our treatment of our parents. SubhanAllah, we spent a nice little time talking about parents. Oh, I'm sorry. I just was because it seems like we have a little bit of break right now. I was just trying to look up the book itself. It seems like it's out of print right now because I'm looking at it on Amazon, and a used copy is they're selling it for $1,300. So I'm sure you probably can get a PDF of it or something like that. Yeah, it seems like they're no longer printing it. So anyone else or any other comments coming from YouTube? How's everyone doing tonight? Alhamdulillah. And where's everyone at? You know, I know Sister Mina, she's in Canada. I think it's Toronto. So yeah, Beantown in the house, Baltimore. I was actually looking not too long ago. I think they say that Baltimore has the largest aquarium in the Northeast. So I was thinking about maybe taking my family there at some point. It's just like a 3 hour drive to get there. You're saying the aquarium is very expensive? Oh, mashallah. I mean, I know when I was looking at the one in Camden, uh, and the one in Camden, it it was going to cost around $150 for all of my family to go. So that's me, my wife, and my 11-year-old and my 1-year-old. So if it's within that ballpark, then I would consider it to be, I guess, like the going rate, so to speak. But no, the Baltimore Aquarium is considered to be the largest in the Northeast. So not it's not the largest in the country necessarily, but it's the largest in the Northeast. So the California one might be better. I mean, excuse me, might be bigger. But in the Northeast, the Baltimore Aquarium is considered to be the largest. And Sister Jewel still holding it down at NY. Yeah, I haven't been to New York in a long time, and I kind of hope I don't have to. Though, if the rabbi at the school that I'm at, if he gets his way, we might be making a trip to New York. But yeah, I think you are more than well aware that I'm not a New York fan. Though I did like inadvertently root for the Knicks. It wasn't direct. Like I've never been a Knicks fan. I was kind of like was amazed at Knicks fans. Like you guys are still holding out. Like your team hasn't done anything since before I was born. But I usually kind of go for the underdog, so to speak. So, after 53 years, I'm like, all right, they deserve to at least get a championship once in 53 years. And I also just kind of figured, and I don't even follow basketball anymore, but I had figured that the Spurs will probably have a much better chance of getting another championship next year or the year after that, more so than the Knicks will. Like this might be their, they might be their one and done for another 50 something years or something like that. There are no apartments at Closet, only homes, so I'm still hoping one day. No, they do have. So the thing is that in the El Closet community, for one, like a lot of people who are like you can would say like a part of the Elma Closet community. For one, they don't even necessarily live like in like the true Elma Closet community. So like uh, for for those who may be familiar with the Elma Closet community and the area around it, which is Macungie, Pennsylvania. Um, a good portion of the community, like for example, the teachers and other community members, they live in an area that's kind of like behind the train tracks. So there's some train tracks that are right behind Amacossid. And so a lot of the community, a good number of community members, they live in the houses um, behind those train tracks. Um, and so that's where you get a lot of like that's even where for at least for right now like some of the students they live in the house um, that's over there like that's their dorm house and so on and so forth. However, other members of the community don't necessarily live in that area. So for example, I live in a townhouse in a complex which is about 6 minutes away from Alma Closet. But I don't live like directly in that community, so to speak. And there are definitely apartments, within a 15-minute drive of Alma Closet. So I mean, if it's just I would say more of the issue than housing would just be work, because McCountry, Pennsylvania is like really the middle of nowhere. I mean, I like it because I like the suburbs. My family likes it because they like the outdoors and the nature scenery and the mountains and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really not much out here. So it's so for me it's fine. But if a person is really into the city life, they'll probably be bored out their mind very quickly. And then again, the other thing is having work opportunities. Like a lot of the people who live in the community, particularly the husbands, they actually either A are able to work from home, so they just do a lot of online work, or B they do hybrid work where they actually don't work in the immediate area, but they are able to do a good portion of their work from home, but then they might have to travel. Like so, for example, I know someone who's a lawyer who does his law actually in New Jersey. So sometimes he has to travel to New Jersey. I know other people who, well, I think there are other people who travel to New York, and so on and so forth. So basically, what I'm saying is that people just make it work. It's not necessarily like a situation where like everything is just like kind of facilitated here for people, so to speak. I just happened to be in a position where a position opened up at Lehigh University, which is only a half hour away from Maqasid, and so it just happened to work out. But yeah, if I didn't get the position at Lehigh, there's no way I'd be living out in Makunji. Yeah, my aunt was saying that she was getting a little worried in the finals. I didn't even know that. I guess my aunt is a Knicks fan. I don't know if she's like always been a Knicks fan or she was just rooting for them because they finally seemed like they were going to do something. But I mean, for me, I was definitely surprised that they were able to come back in Game 4 from 29 points down, and and then like they made it really exciting because it came down to the last minute. And the thing is, I didn't even watch the game. I would just occasionally check. Stop that. I would just occasionally check the score, and then all of a sudden at the end of it, I seen that the Knicks had won by 1 point at the end. I was like, Subhanallah. So, so New York has something to celebrate now. Thailand over Vietnam, mashallah. I don't know much about them. I know that you can get some good oud in some of those places, but I don't even know where in those places that you could. But uh, but my only experience with going to other countries is that if a person has never lived in another country, it sometimes it's not the experience. They don't have the experience that they were hoping to have. I'm not saying that would be the case for you. It's just that I just know from personal experience is that like, because for example, in particular with um, I've known Muslims who wanted to move to Muslim countries, uh, and and I remember one situation in particular, like I could, it was a situation where there was a sister who was we were in an Islamic store, and she was like having a conversation on her phone, but it was almost like she wanted everyone in the store to be in on the conversation because she was just, you couldn't help but hear what she was talking about. And so she was, saying that she wanted to move to Saudi Arabia and that she was tired of America and that she wanted this and that type of experience. And I'm just kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you're gonna get what it is that you're looking for. you know, because sometimes it might sound nice to move to a Muslim country, but every place has its difficulties. But Thailand and Vietnam, they sound interesting. Uh, uh, and I'm not saying that a person shouldn't necessarily consider moving to a Muslim country. I remember when I first had when I first came back from Yemen, I had the thought that it's like there's no way I'm going to stay in America. Like I'm like, all right, what's the next flight that I can get up out of here? I was thinking about going to Dubai or something like that. Even though my teacher had, basically told me, yeah, don't do that. And so I somewhat unintentionally took his advice. Yeah, I'm an introvert myself, and so it can be nice at times. But I think I might be one of those people who's like an introverted extrovert. Like I don't necessarily mind being around people and talking to people if it's like a good conversation and it's kind of like natural. But I'm not one of those people who can just like make small talk and just talk to anyone or something like that. And I don't necessarily need to have people that I'm necessarily talking to. So like all my personality tests would say that I'm an introvert, but I do like to interact with people at times. But but yeah, but yeah. So it might work out. I would say that I would just say like if you haven't visited those places, I would say just visit them first to try to get a feel of how it would be. and then like if you want to make the move, then you can definitely see what's out there outside of America. I try to accept a lot. I try to accept a lot of places us where He wants us, but I keep making dua for all sorts of miracles. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll be amazed. Like you, it doesn't necessarily even have to come to the point of being a karama, of being a miracle per se. Uh, like I had no clue that I would necessarily end up living in Makanji. Like living in the Cosset area is always just kind of like, yeah, it'd probably be nice, but it's like, I'll just settle for visiting every once in a while. And then lo and behold, when I was working at the prison just became, it became even more toxic than it already was. So and then I had graduated with my MDiv, and so I had that for about 2 years. So I'm just kind of like, all right, let me see, how marketable I am at this point, so to speak. Like, I spent all these 3 years getting this master's degree. Let's see if that has actually has any benefits to it. And so, lo and behold, when I was looking up different Islamic chaplain positions or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden Lehigh University popped up. I didn't even know what Lehigh University was. And so, but I just seen that I was in Pennsylvania. So, like, one of the first things that I did was that I just did a map quest, you know, how far is McCosset from Lehigh University? And then I seen that it's only a half hour away. I was like, huh, that can actually work. And about 6 months later, Allah placed me in Makunji. MashaAllah. So you never know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can place us wherever He wishes. And alhamdulillah, I definitely like being at Lehigh University much more than Northern State Prison. Yeah, yeah. I like to interact with people when it's I guess you can kind of say like when it's just natural, like like naturally good conversations, not like I'm trying to force a conversation and trying to think about things to say and so on and so forth. I have a friend of mine. He's good at that. Like he can just talk to anyone, and you know, and have like genuine conversations and so on and so forth. Like I don't have that skill. Yeah, and also I do have my limit. After a certain point, I'm just kind of like I've been in situations where I'm just kind of like, all right, I need some type of excuse to get out of this conversation. I remember one time, me and my wife, when we first got married, we were in New York, and we were visiting someone, and it was someone that my wife somewhat knew. Like my wife didn't even really know this person. Um, she only knew them because someone that she did know that was overseas had sent something for her through this individual. So my wife had like very minimal uh, uh, knowledge of this individual, and so we went to New York to get this particular package, and so they invited us in, and they're very nice, very lovely, lovely couple, very hospitable, and they just I guess they just really liked having guests. And so like my wife was talking to the woman of the house, I was talking to her husband, and like we're trying to be nice and polite, but like when we got there it was probably already like 8 or 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden like we're sitting in their house and it's like going to like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 11:30. So like I'm like I've already hit my limit, and I'm trying to like give my wife the signal like, yo, we we need to try to wrap this up. But it's almost like they had us in a strategic hold. It's like when I kind of like thought that I had a minute to try to give my wife the signals of like, okay, let's try to get to go, like her conversation would start picking up. And then when she had the opportunity to kind of like try to give me the signal, like, okay, we can try to get ready to go, my conversation with him will start picking it up. And it's like neither one of us was trying to intentionally do it, but it's just like we weren't trying to be rude to our host either. So he's like, okay. So I don't think we left until like 12:30 or something like that. It's just kind of like we just came to pick up a book. And so when we finally both got into the car, you know, that's we kind of both told each other, it's like, look, you know, I was not trying to stay that long, because like this was in New York and we drove, and so like we still had like an hour ride back to New Jersey. So it's like we were not trying to stay until 1:30, or I mean to 12:30 or whatever. uh, but yeah, so yeah, I just so I understand. Like I said, I have my limits as well. But yeah, it kind of it definitely felt as if like they were like tag teaming us. It's as if like they had pre-planned like, you know, all right, I'm gonna talk to her, you're gonna talk to him, and we're just not gonna let them leave until we want them to. Mashallah.
Salam.
Wa alaikum salam tala.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. I've just a very quick question. I just found out about this. Like in the middle of Surah Yusuf, someone was telling me about manna and ishmam. Do you know anything about that?
Manam in Ishram.
Yeah,
Do you know exactly where in Surah Yusuf it is?
it's in the Surah Yusuf, and the ayah is 267.
Ayat 267?
Yeah,
It wouldn't be 267 because Surah Yusuf doesn't have that many ayats. Uh, but I just want to see if I can get the context of it. Is it ayat 67?
I think so. It's about a pronunciation. It's manna and how that came about, and and something about Ishmam.
All right, I'm gonna try to see if
I'm
I
a
can.
little, yeah. I
I'm
have
gonna.
to. I was thrown back about that because normally, when I read the Quran, I pretty much know, understand all of that, but apparently about the pronunciation. And this is an ayat that's within Surah Yusuf.
And you said ولما. So ayat 67 is ayat where it says وقال يا بني لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة وما أغني عنكم من الله من شيء إن الحكم إلا لله عليه توكلت عليه فليتوكل المتوكلون. So I don't think that's the verse you're referring to. The next verse, it has ولما دخلوا من حيث أمرهم أبوهم ما كان يغني عنهم من الله من شيء إلا حاجة في نفس يعقوب قضاها وإنه لذو علم لما علمناه ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. Um, so I'm not 100% sure which verse it may be referring to, because like I said, Surah Yusuf, it only has 111 ayats. Uh, if you want to double check which ayat it is, and if I do know anything in reference to those words, I can mention it. Um, but I don't think it's verse 67 from what. Uh,
It's a pronunciation, I believe. It has something to do with manna and how to pronounce. Um, and they say it's a ayat is ishmam. I just thrown back by it.
So it might, so you might be referring to a rule of tajweed within Surah Yusuf. That would be more or less my wife's area of expertise. I study tajweed and I try to work on my tajweed, but my wife is more of the tajweed, uh, uh, the tajweed teacher in the house more than I am. Uh, but again, if you want to let me know what the ayat is, where it's found, then inshallah I can, ask my wife about it if I don't know
Yeah,
what it's
that's
referring
just
to.
it. I just found out. I'm not very
So,
explicit about this because it's confusing to me. And
so,
apparently, when you pronounce it, you have to pronounce it in a certain way,
so
and that is how.
you might be talking about verse 11 where it says قالوا يا أبانا ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. So, and the reason why I say that is because in there you have a diamond shape symbol, which indicates uh, uh, yeah, al-ihmam. Yeah, يجب al-ahmam. Yeah, so there is a tajweed that's there. So that's verse 11 in Surah Yusuf. So, do you have wudu? Do you have wudu? Ask your mother about this rule.
What verse is it?
Verse 11, Surah Yusuf.
I'll
So I'm sending Mini-Me to ask his mother about that particular verse, inshallah. So,
Um,
inshallah.
okay, I cannot be more explicit about this, so I'll just. I thought I'd ask.
So, so, um, so it looks like you're talking about the verse 11 in Surah Yusuf. And so I just sent my son to ask his mother about the specific rulings in terms of recitation at that particular juncture, because there is a particular rule that's associated there. It's just that, again, I have not mastered tajweed such that I would be able to fully answer that question. So, inshallah, hopefully he'll be back sometime in the near future with the answer from his mother, inshallah. Uh, did I notice anything in
Okay.
common?
Okay. I mean, I was just asking just to find out more because I usually, when I read the Quran, I'm usually pretty um, good about pronunciation and get to know the meaning. But in this instance, I was thrown off by this. Um, so anyway,
Yeah, so there are a few ayats in the Quran where there is like a very specific special rule in terms of how it's recited. Um, like the one that I know, like off the top of my head is like, in one ayat of the Quran is that the pronunciation is slightly different than what is regularly recited in Hafs, where it's like you would say rijliha, and but it's like a specific way. What did she say?
So this verse is usually called Ta'manna, but in a way there's different pronunciations and stuff of it because like the scholars argue, but the main way is to say Ta'manna for this.
So, so according to what I'm understanding from Mini Me, is that the way that it's written in the Mus'haf is one of the main ways to actually recite it, but that there's difference of opinion amongst the Qur'an, amongst the scholars of recitation, in terms of how you can actually pronounce this particular ayah.
The main one is Ta'manna.
But the main one is the way that it's more or less written. Ta'manna. But it seems like there's difference of opinion amongst the ulama of qira'ah, of recitation, of other ways that you can pronounce it. And so that's why that particular symbol is there. Wallahu alam. And that's verse 11 of Surah Yusuf. Did you notice anything in common with prisoners who were in isolation with respect to their practicing Islam? Do you mean did I have something in common? Did I notice something in common with myself in them, um, or like more general? So if you mean did I have or did I notice things in common with inmates, um, in terms of their practice of Islam and my practice of Islam, then of course, there's going to be some overlaps. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and so uh, uh, so uh, the thing is that Islam in the prison is it's a very unique situation, just because the prison environment in and of itself um, is like no other environment that you can compare it to, because these are individuals who are completely isolated from the rest of the general society, and they are in a situation where they are constantly in a toxic environment, and they're constantly having to navigate that environment, oftentimes having to navigate with un-Islamic situations constantly around them. It just be I would become amazed at some of those who are able to uphold um, a basic standard of morality. Like I remember I had to do the opening prayer for the graduation ceremony, and I remember becoming very emotional standing up there, and I was like, "What the heck is going on? Like this is just like a basic graduation and a prayer." But part of from what I thought to myself anyway, to try to like justify why I was becoming emotional about it, but part of what I think was happening was that I was like subconsciously reflecting upon what it takes to, in particular, because there were two individuals who were, I think at that time they had completed their bachelor's degree. One of them had actually went on to complete his master's degree. And the thing is that that may not necessarily sound as big of a deal, because probably many of us know someone or ourselves may have a bachelor's or master's degree, but we have access to libraries, laptops. Uh, when we have to write a paper, we're usually using Microsoft Word, which is like writing half of the paper for us in terms of like grammatical mistakes and stuff like that, and word misspellings and whatever case may be. But these are individuals who literally are writing essays on a bunk bed in a notebook using lined loose leaf paper with pencils, and or some of them if they are able to have grandfathered in using the old school typewriters, for those who may know what those are. you know yeah, you know I don't even think uh, many younger people today even know what a typewriter
I know what a
is.
typewriter is.
Put your hand down. uh,
I'm musician.
but uh, not to mention that not just having to deal with everything that's going around, all around you, in terms of drug use and violence and officer abuse and so on and so forth. So again, I would be amazed at those who really try to hold on to a sense of a sense of true uprightness, trying to navigate that environment. But at the same time, what I noticed about inmates is that uh, many of them are very sensitive, and essentially, as a friend of mine would have put it in a poem that he wrote, is that they're just boys who are grown. That I've had like, and I don't say this in any type of like it doesn't even sound right what I'm about to say. Like I hate to say it, but it's like just to kind of like give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Like I've literally had murderers come to me crying, or rapists come to me crying, more than one. Uh, and so for many of them, it's a situation of like really trying to struggle to deal with oftentimes the toxic lives that they've led up until that point, and trying to see if they can try to hold on to some aspect of the religion. And so so that's why I say it's like prison is like its own really unique situation. But you definitely do have sincere Muslims that are in prison, like people who are really trying to worship Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And then also you have others who you know may not necessarily be doing the same. So, but usually what I always say to people in regards to prison is like, if you've never been in a prison, and I don't mean just like, visiting a relative who might be incarcerated, but like if you've never like been in the prison environment, like, been on the grounds and interacting with the officers and multiple inmates and dealing with administration and all these type of things, like, you just, there's no way to really understand. Uh, there's no way to truly understand what it's like to be inmates. Like there's a documentary called Prison Blues. Mustafa Davis made the documentary, and it has Usama Khanna is like one of the main people that speaks in the documentary, along with two formerly incarcerated individuals. Um, and so like that can give you some um, insight into being a Muslim in prison. But even then, it's going to be uh, their their experience with it, and so on and so forth. So it's just uh, prison is just like its own beast, so to speak. The, the thing that they say about being in prison, whether you're an inmate or you're an employee, is that everyone's doing time. Like, for the most part, like if you were to go to a prison and you would ask anyone there, like, how much longer do you have to retirement, pretty much everyone can tell you. Or like, or it's either that or they're strategically making their exit strategy. Like they're either like, just really, just trying to hold out until they can reach retirement, or they're making their exit strategy for something else. And then the inmates, yeah, of course, they're always just trying to find a way to get out. you know, the, uh, and then that's a whole nother issue in regards to the prison system and so on and so forth. But yeah, Islam does flourish in the prison for good and for bad. Um, but it's a very unique experience because you're also dealing, and like I've had inmates come to me and ask me what they should do, because when they get out, they know that there's certain people that are still looking for them, meaning that there are people who are looking to kill them, and like what should they do when they get out to try to handle that situation, uh, and so on and so forth. Or like having people ask me like what how can they make toba when they've committed a murder, or or that they've committed a murder against a Muslim, uh, and so on and so forth. So you know prison is you know Someone had recently asked me if there was any aspect of being in the prison that I miss. And one of the part of the answer that I told them was like, if I were to say that there were certain aspects that I did miss, there's enough negative aspects to it that uh, that kind of supersede whatever it is that I actually would miss. Like, whatever I would say that I did miss, like there's probably like five other things that I don't miss. So it really doesn't balance itself out. And I see there was another comment. I see, so Chandel, I see you mentioned something else, and I'm going to get to that, but I also see that you put something else in the comment that it seems this directly related to this conversation. I work in the ER, and I see the inmates come in shackled from hands to feet, and it's overwhelming for me to see humans this way. I don't know why they're in there, but I feel compassion towards them. Some will even give me salams, and I always eagerly return their salam, just very humbling. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those. So prison is again, it's a funny environment because I'll put it to you like this. I had a training officer. So when you work in a prison, at least in New Jersey, in the state of New Jersey, and I'm sure this is probably the same procedure in every prison, but when you work in prison, you every year you have to go through mandatory training, and part of that mandatory training is basically proper etiquette in relation to working in the prison. So I remember my first year working in the prison, our training officer, he was given the presentation and he said something that I've never forgotten to this day. He said that I seen most of you, or so I said, he said most or many, whatever. Yeah, I seen many of you on your first day here when you came in, and it's like you came in, you're all wide-eyed and and giddy and whatever the case may be, and then he said, "I seen you a year later." And all of a sudden, that look in your eye changed. It went from that, wide-eyed, giddy look to all of a sudden that "don't f with me" look in your eye. And the thing is that, and this was like I said, this was my first year. Uh, and so the thing is that, I know what he's talking about, so having worked in the prison system for almost 6 years, you really do start to change your thought process and even the way that you interact after working in the prison. So like, again, when you see an inmate and you see kind of like the way that the American government treats incarcerated individuals, yes, it can be very disheartening. It could be a sad situation and so on and so forth. But then at the same time, if you're a person that works with inmates, you're in the prison system and you see what happens in the prison system on a regular basis. Like, I'll put it to you like this. I'm not a person that is for the prison industrial complex that we have in America. I have a lot of problems with the prison, the school prison pipeline, and so on and so forth. But when I was in prison, there are individuals who I knew that internally I would just say to myself, I pray that they never let you out. Like, there are some individuals that just, they truly are a danger to society. Like, it's just, it's sad to say, but there are individuals who truly are, they would just be very dangerous if they were to be able to freely roam in society. And the thing is, like, one of the things that they teach you in training, and this is something that one of the administrators where I worked at, he used to always talk about, and he writes books and has a podcast about these type of things and so on and so forth, is that one of the things that they teach you is that in prison, is oftentimes not the aggressive person that you have to worry about, like, the person that wants to curse you out or threaten you or whatever the case may be. Usually it's the person that wants to be your friend that you need to worry about. Like, the person that's overly nice to you, that's the person, like, the inmates that used to be very nice to me or whatever the case may be, those are the ones I was like the most concerned about. And so it's just so again, it's just like in prison, it's just like a whole different environment. Like it's a whole different mindset. Like I tell people all the time, like, you know, the way I used to be in prison and the way I should speak to people in prison and the way that I used to carry myself in prison is like completely different than what I am outside of prison. And the messed up thing is that that's just what the environment produces. Like it just, you know, it just produces an environment like that where it's just it's not conducive to human growth and development. It's just it's not there. Like if an inmate becomes a better person in prison, that's because that inmate took it upon himself personally to do that. The environment itself does not facilitate for that. You know, for the most part, many inmates would just tell me, it's like, look, all prison did to me was just teach me how to be a better criminal. Which, you know, other inmates would just say, like, you know, that's also ridiculous because if you were to become a better criminal and you come back here, that still means that you're a pretty bad criminal because you still got caught. But, you know, these are prison conversations. But yeah, I used to also work in a hospital as well. And so actually, one time when I was working in the hospital, I had seen an inmate that was in the prison that I used to work at. That was a interesting, interesting situation. The angels Harut and Ma'rut. What did it mean by them being a trial for the people? So if you're referencing the angels who were during the time of Suleiman, the reason why they were a trial for people was because they were able to they like if you look at the like what's mentioned about him about them, and then again this is if uh, uh, if this the correct reference, but so that's why I said if you're referring to the angels that were during the time of Suleiman alayhi salam, is that they had knowledge of certain aspects of magic essentially. And so like it mentions in the Quran that they had a magic that can separate a husband from their wife. Um, and so they tried to warn the people, you know, basically not to take this knowledge from us. And basically what it was that Sulaiman alayhi salam, he was learning this knowledge in order to, you know, basically stop it. And so they were a fitna for people if they were to try to learn this knowledge and then they were going to use it for shar, for evil. So that is more or less the reference to that. But uh, 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 but that's just kind of like a general um, discussion. Was that what you were referencing? Yeah, yeah. So essentially, what the angels were actually, you know, trying to tell the people is that, you know, don't try to take this knowledge from us. You know, Suleiman being a prophet, you know, he was, you know, trying to take that knowledge to stop the fitin that was taking place during his time. Um, uh, but uh, but yeah, it was a knowledge that we weren't supposed to, meaning we, meaning human beings, we weren't supposed to be trying to learn that knowledge because it wasn't going to be of any benefit to us. It can actually cause harm to us and to others around us. And so the angels were trying to warn that, you know, because the concept of the angels is that they only do what they're commanded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they were trying to warn the people that, you know, basically this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon us to do. This is not something that you as human beings should be engaged in. That's probably the best way of putting it. That, you know, it's just, you know, it's kind of like as an adult, you know, there might be certain things that you have to do in order to protect your family or to stop some other type of harm or something like that. But you know, you would tell your children like, you know, no, you can't do this. Like, yes, I may have to do this. because, and there's a necessary reason why I have to do this, but you do, this is not for you to do. So the angels in Suleiman, they were doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had wanted for them to do, but it was limited to them. It wasn't meant to go to the generality of people. Wallahu alam. And Allah knows best. Yeah, it can definitely be a challenge. Hence, I don't work in prisons anymore. And the thing is that I could probably be making a significant amount more if I did still work in the prison. But the money isn't worth it. Actually, I was just telling someone the lawsuit that I ended up being in while I was in prison just recently is finally finished. So that kind of gives you an insight of things you have to deal with working in a prison. Yeah, I've worked in a hospital as well. I did uh, I did chaplaincy work at a hospital for about 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, 3.5 years.
For about 3 years, I did chaplaincy work at a level 1 trauma center. So we were the place that if a hospital couldn't handle a certain situation, they would send patients to our facility because we were able basically to handle any medical situation. And yeah, it can be much. It could be a lot. Did you say that you're a nurse in the hospital? ER tech? Yeah. Uh, yeah, it could, because you're seeing basically all of the traumas, all the different codes and things like that. Yeah, it definitely can take its toll. Not to mention the hospital schedules don't like it's always amazing to me. It's like if you go into the medical field, they'll tell you about how lack of exercise, lack of sleep, and bad diets all contribute to all different types of health problems and diseases and so on and so forth. And then you go to a hospital, and it's like they are like the epicenter of all of that. Like they have the worst schedules. The cafeterias are atrocious, and uh, oftentimes and the only thing out of those three that they might still, engage in is some type of exercise. But the eating and sleeping part, they just it's just completely a miss. And so like you add that on top of the different traumas that you see, not to mention that patients aren't always the easiest people to deal with, and then the families of patients can even be worse at times. And if you're working in an ER situation, all the different things that you see in that regard. Like I never knew that I was queasy until I seen a car accident where someone came in and the bone of their shin was sticking out of their leg, and like I seen that, and all of a sudden, like I had to sit down, like my stomach just was like it couldn't handle it. Uh, so yeah, I can only imagine. Uh, and the thing is, like, I was a part-time per diem chaplain, so like I would only be there maybe once a week, if that, and so on and so forth. But day in and day out, yeah, it has its toll. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. Yeah, see, 12-hour shift, 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Like, and what did they tell you? They tell you that the best sleep that you should always try to get is between what? Generally speaking, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And what did they have you? You're up, fully active, right smack dab in that time frame, and so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, and yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm also a proponent that we need to do something. Like I understand the concept that medicine is not something that you can put a time frame on. Like if a person has a medical emergency, it's not going to wait until normal business hours, so to speak. But it's like there needs to be some type of way to try to help the people who work in that day in and day out, because it's just it's not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, you always look for the positives in whatever situation, as the dua would go. Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. You know, Alhamdulillah over every situation. Yeah. So in that time, you might even be able to catch Qiyam al-Layl, inshallah ta'ala. Try to take advantage of whatever you can. But yeah, the hospital is another rough environment. I've had some interesting conversations in the hospital. It's amazing sometimes how much people want to open up in the hospital. I've, I've heard and seen a lot of things. I was just like, I really don't need to be hearing or seeing this. MashaAllah. Well, I guess it's like an opposite thing, because like a lot of my interesting conversations or things that I felt I shouldn't have seen has actually come from elderly women. So, so yeah, I guess it's just that natural tendency, like you incline towards like who you would like naturally like. I'm not saying that they were necessarily attracted to me or necessarily whatever the case may be, but like you know, a man is gonna you know try to look for a nice woman to to talk to, whatever case may be, and a woman is going to look for a man to you know be there to help or assist or to listen or whatever. So I mean, so it makes sense. But yeah, like because no, there's this like one patient that I remember in particular, and she used to call on me like specifically at times, and like she just like kind of like didn't care about like what it is that might be seen or whatever the case may be, and then like she would just tell me like all her personal business, like I knew about her sons and so on and so forth. It's just I'm like, yeah, I really don't need to be seeing or hearing this. But as a chaplain, like that's my job. I was supposed to have a ministry of presence. So yeah, so I'm not surprised that you're saying that your most of your experiences are coming, or should I say, kind of most of your probably more interesting experiences are coming from elderly, lonely men. You know, so it's not to say that I didn't have some interesting conversations with some of the men too, but probably some of my more interesting conversations came from some of the women, and some of just sad conversations. Like, yeah, that the hospital is another place where you start to see like how sad some people's lives are. You know, you start to, especially like the I guess you could say like regular customers, like particularly like people who are strung out on alcohol or other type of drugs or things like that. Like you could just see how sad their situation is, and other people who have chronic illnesses and they don't really have anyone to help or support them, and yeah, it starts taking a toll. Like when I was there, when I first started there, and we finished our year of CPE, clinical pastoral education, one of my classmates was saying how this was like the first time that I had like really heard the term, but he was saying how he had developed emotional fatigue, where basically he was just saying like, it's just gotten to a point where like I know that this is a sad situation, and I know that in a normal circumstance I would have certain feelings of empathy and so on and so forth, but it's just like, I'm just so emotionally drained from all these different experiences that I just don't have the emotional capacity to react the way that I should. And so when he said that, it's just kind of like, all right, that's what I'm going through. Like, you know, the but it's just this also a reminder of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates the human being, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in a way that we can only take but so much in terms of difficulties. So whether it be physical, in terms of pain or difficulties, like whether it be physical, emotional, mental, like at a certain point, the body just says like, all right, that's enough. Like I'm not taking anymore. So it's just, very ajib to kind of have that experience. So now you're trying to get me in trouble in the last few minutes that we have here. What do you think about the gender switches? I feel like the system is trying to make me a little crazy. Cray cray. I have men who like men but wants to be called women. It's so confusing. One of my wife's teachers, one of the things that she says is that, um, in particular, like with the whole aspect of like gender and so on and so forth, is that really if you just get to know people as people, and then in terms of just like if you have to call them or something like that, just call them by their names. Like, generally speaking, most people are not going to object to you calling them by their name. So like, I try my best not to necessarily, get caught up in the different aspects of gender and so on and so forth. So what I do is that I try to be overly kind and like really, try to have a true sense of care and concern for people. And then in terms of like addressing them, then I will just, try to make sure that I know what their name is, and I'll address them by that. So this way I can try to avoid getting caught up in the different aspects of gender, and, who wants to be called by what pronoun and so on and so forth. So, I just try to do it that way, um, which is closer to the way that we're supposed to be in terms of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, when he used to interact with people, he used to interact with them fully. Like, he would really try to be personal with people. So this is why some of the Sahaba, they used to say that they felt that they were the Prophet ﷺ's, most loved uh, companion. The famous situation that I always like to reference is I always forget the Sahaba's name, unfortunately, but one of the Sahaba, he was one of the later Sahaba to enter into Islam, and he used to say that the Prophet ﷺ, he treats me so well, like I must be his favorite, like every time he sees me he smiles, and like he's always so good to me. It's like I must be his favorite. So he said that one day I got up the nerve to ask him, like who is your favorite. And so he said so I so he said that I went to the Prophet ﷺ and I asked him, who's better, me or Abu Bakr? And the Prophet ﷺ, لا يخرج من هذا إلى حق, like the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't speak a lie, nothing's going to come from his mouth except for the truth. So he said Abu Bakr. And so he said, okay, who's better, me or Omar? And then he said Omar. And he said, okay, who's better, me or Uthman? He said Uthman. Until eventually he came to a point where he said, I wish I just never asked him in the first place. But that's how the Prophet ﷺ made him feel. Like, he made him feel as if like he was the best of the Sahaba and that he was the most beloved to the Prophet ﷺ. But that was just the way the Prophet ﷺ was. And but the thing is that we do our best, and so it's a situation where 30 years ago we wouldn't necessarily even be having this conversation per se. So it's a thing where we do our best, and at the end of the day, as the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in the mahma bin niyat, that actions are only based upon intention. So our intention is that we're not trying to cause harm to people, but the thing is that we're not going to be able to necessarily always be in a situation where we can kind of tick all the boxes that every individual wants us to tick. So as long as our intention is not to cause harm to someone, if we do cause harm to someone, then we can ask for their forgiveness. But again, we just we do the best that we're capable of doing. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not place a burden upon a servant except that which they can bear. So we do the best that we can, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. So if we're able to try to follow this prophetic model of to the best of our ability, getting to know people such that we can just call them by their name, or just one of the things that again, this is coming from my aspect of chaplaincy, is one of the things that you find is that people, they actually like to talk about themselves if you give them the right space and environment. So sometimes that can just work. It's just like just let people talk. Like you wouldn't even have to say anything. Like in all honesty, like even from a standpoint of like academic chaplaincy, is that one of the primary things that you learn in chaplaincy, as from an academic perspective, is just the actual strategic ways of listening and how to get people to open up on their own accord. Like if I had to sum up like one of the major components of chaplaincy, that is like probably number one, is learning how to listen and to respond to people so that they can basically lead their own conversation in terms of like what is going to be beneficial for them in that moment, in that space. So I don't know if that helps, but inshallah, in every situation, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and assistance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's Ghafur Rahim. He's forgiving and merciful, and He's Ar-Rahman. He is the most merciful. So inshallah, He can help and assist us, inshallah. So it looks like I've been given the signal. We've come to the 8:30 mark. So alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for being with us, and inshallah, if there was any benefit that anyone took from tonight, that's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes, and there were probably many, were only from the weakness of my own self. So I ask you to forgive me for them, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives me for them. And so, inshallah, we will leave you all in Allah's care. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam husbana wa ni'mal wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.